The following is a presentation of the Force Center podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, this is the Force Center podcast feed, and this particular episode is the Bad Batch Report. I'm Joseph Scrimshaw, and the person making great racing Doppler sounds is Ken Napzok.
Hey, everybody, this was a lot of fun. I have a new video game dream, a lot of cool things in this episode.
Yeah, I want to get my N64 and my cartridge video game, Star Wars Riot Racer, right?
And Space Mario Kart.
It is Space Mario Kart. That's an obvious connection. I was too obsessed with what this episode means for Tech's soul. But you're right. It's totally Mario Kart. We just needed like Space Bowser.
I mean, he wasn't racing, but I kind of felt we got it.
Ooh, yeah, there's some Bauer vibes in what, Malegi? Yeah.
Yeah, Malegi. Yeah. Ernie Hudson and Malegi.
Ernie Hudson. Yeah, okay, I take it back. We needed Luigi.
There you go.
My controversial criticism this episode that the robot Teo should have had spoken like Luigi from Super Mario Brothers. There you go. We are already discussing episode 4 of season 2 of The Bad Batch. It is called Faster, written by Matt Michenovitz, directed by Stuart Lee, and story editor continues to be Matt Michenovitz, credited throughout the season so far. This is one where clearly Mr. Michenovitz story edited himself for a very fun episode. Ken, what was your general viewing experience? Did you have the midnight experience last night?
I did not. This was the last episode that I've watched ahead. We have the press screeners, as we've said. Doesn't make us special humans. We just have a link with our emails on it. And I watched this a couple weeks ago, and then watched this again 2 or 3 times actually prior to this episode. And I was a little worried because I knew the big number 3 was this solitary clone, this emotional art piece, and it got rightly praised out there online. I was like, oh, but next week it's a little different feel, and I wonder what people are people going to react to that. But I think I was hopeful, and I think it turned out the way where it's like this was kind of let's have some fun, let's learn some things while we're racing. So my experience was a little different, and I didn't stay up. Watched it again this morning. It's quick. It's a faster, more intense watch, and that way I got a lot of viewings in. So that was my experience.
The true Lucas experience. Yeah, I was not able to stay up until midnight last night and watched it, so I watched it yesterday afternoon, kind of the middle of the afternoon, with a roast beef sandwich and honestly some stress. I was getting pretty stressed yesterday afternoon when I watched it, and you had told me that it's a lighter episode. It's like, okay, great. So I knew what I was getting into. And then it was just such a delight, such a surprise that it really relaxed me. So thank you, Bad Batch.
Yeah, I think it worked. I think they clearly, these are professionals. They know when they're looking at their episodes what they got. And they knew number 3 was a gut punch. They knew it was something different. And I think this was placed perfectly.
Yeah, it was really great, and I can't wait to see the online reaction, because this one is definitely the kind of episode where sometimes people say, oh, it's a filler episode, or it's got too much of X kind of comedy or that kind of thing, but I just felt like there's so much heart and so much of the spirit of what Bad Batch is, so I'm really curious to see what people think, but for now, let's share what we think. What was your overall reaction? Did you love this one? Sounds like it, struggle with parts of it? Where'd you go?
I should be a better podcaster. I should withhold my opinions and feelings for this section. I really love this episode. Riot Racing is a riot. I loved it. I love the feel. I love the comedy. They leaned into all of it, and there's some really cool lessons. I was going to say buried. That's not even true. They're pretty direct. Some of the stuff is pretty direct, and this is the fun, wild side of Star Wars, the little bit weirder side of Star Wars. And I really appreciate it. And I appreciate it more, again, not just in this post-Andor world, this somber Star Wars. We keep mentioning that, but it's true. But also, again, last week's episode was that vibe. Big, thoughtful, big emotions, a gut punch, like I said earlier. And you need this kind of stuff. This is just as much as Star Wars as the big sweeping lessons. And again, lessons in this episode. I've watched it 4 or 5, almost maybe 4.5 times.
Wow.
I had a little extra time before recording today, so I just kind of skipped through it and watched some of my favorite parts again. So therefore, it really worked, and I loved it, and it's got me zooming around my house.
Yeah, no, the mood is infectious. I really did enjoy this one a ton because I kind of thought the episode was, from one perspective, there's nothing shocking about the episode, right? Kind of, it's well written, so it gives you the hints pretty quickly of like, oh, I think I know what's going to happen in this episode, And in terms of plot, almost everything plays out in a really logical way, but it's all the details and the meaning of it that gave me so much joy. I love that it was on the surface, while it seems pretty straightforward, the episode was actually a lot of different kinds of things all at once. It was a tech spotlight. It was a special focus episode. It was also a Sid episode. It was also a building block for the larger conflict of the show, right? To me, it would be like, I would have enjoyed this if this was really just Tech learning about himself, right? But it's setting up very, very clearly with that real clarity at the end of, can they trust Sid, right? Are the mercenary jobs they're taking morally acceptable to them, which is something that was really an issue in season 1. If we're not soldiers anymore, what are we? We're just doing these jobs for money. Are we bounty hunters? Are we mercenaries? They're really wrestling with their nouns. So all this story brought that back into focus and kind of even raised the stakes on that of like, not only is it possible that the jobs you're doing are not morally acceptable, Sid's going to stab you in the back at the worst time. Like it raised the stakes for the story and the relationships as well.
I'm really glad you focused on the Sid stuff there. I thought that was one of the things that I was prepared to use in battle with the word filler, if that was going to come out there. There's literally this dangling question over all of the end of this episode. The music cue itself is like gong gong gong. I really focused in on it, but Sid goes through this real. We'll talk about some of the themes and stakes, but in a second, but goes through this real challenging moment of no, I'm not that way anymore, and it's your nature. This is what you do, type of thing there. And then at the center of it all was the stuff going on with Omega, just cementing her position is not just honorable and admirable as Malegi says their actions are, but no, we help. That's what we do. And it's what we are. So big things, big lessons, big themes hanging over all the fun.
Yeah. So, and I think for me, it's also just as somebody who has done a lot of comedy over the years, I love that this is in general, tonally, it is a comedy episode. It is light and fun and really blatant swing for the fences jokes all throughout. But just because comedy is there doesn't mean there aren't ideas there. The ideas about tech that we're going to talk about, when we get into themes and stakes and that, just kind of rich, complex ideas about growth, change, found family. When you start to get into the Sid and Omega stuff, like the episode is light, but in that classic Star Wars way, just like the Solitary Clone, I think sometimes Star Wars is so successful when the idea is minimal, but it's leading you to such huge ideas that affect the story, affect the characters, and can affect you in your life.
Right.
If you think about them. And the Solitary Clone was like the dark version of this, but I honestly feel like what was going on with Tech was like just as deep and just as important, but told in this different way.
Yeah, told in just a damn fun way that's got me thinking about video games.
Exactly. Yeah, I just kept thinking about that big question of the show. If we're not soldiers anymore, then who or what are we? Final thought for me on kind of an overall reaction is I really loved how much of a focus episode this was for Tech. And I kind of hope that more focus episodes are coming for Hunter, Wrecker, Echo, Omega, even Sid. How do you feel about that?
I really enjoyed that. I think there's a push to get more storytelling for Echo, which is something we echo here. Hey, all right. And Tech, I know he is, your favorite. It's hard to pick favorites, but he resonates and connects with you just as Wrecker and his love of Mantel Mix connects with me. And it was just fun to see in the reactions. Some played for comedy, some with deep meaning behind it, including his wave at the end. It's one of my favorite things. And it honored Tech. It really honored Tech, and it is a lot about him. His skill set being what it needs to be part of this journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there was some great Wrecker moments. I did watch it again this morning to kind of scrub through for a couple quotes and things like that. And I couldn't help but freeze frame all the different times Wrecker was eating stuff. He had some sort of multi-legged on a stick, like 5 chicken legs on a stick kind of thing. Like, Wrecker. Wrecker.
Meals on sticks is a part of my life. That's one of the reasons I love Wrecker.
Yeah. And I took a lot of notes about Tech, which is why I am sometimes like Tech. So let's get into the big ideas, the big themes, what ideas were at stake in this episode. I suspect that you and I went to some similar places with the central story about Tech, but I really wrestled with how I wanted to say it, how it was resonating with me. So I'm going to throw the sort of umbrella term that I used for the big theme out, and then I'm curious to see how you titled your theme. For me, what was really moving about Tech's journey was this thematic idea that your skills don't put you in a box, they free you. Yeah. Specifically the idea that we all have skill sets, and if we are rigid about the way we define them, they can feel limiting. But if we look at it and say, well, I have this set of skills, how can I apply them to all sorts of different things? Suddenly you're not being contained by your skills. You're sort of being freed by them and enhanced by them. And we'll talk about all the details of it, but that was, to me, like the moral that was really great for Tech and great for me to hear. How did you sort of frame this big picture idea?
Great place to start. This is the first note I wrote for myself was just Tech and his skill sets. Just that was on a first view, and you just kind of put down some like, hey, what emerges for you in the narrative here, and that's where I went first. And I love what you're saying about it frees you. It goes to that Star Wars Visions Jedi Rocks episode I love so much of we're just a band. What can we do? That's what you are, and that's what you bring, and all these things. And Tech maybe sometimes gets poked at and made fun of, and Wrecker does too, big oaf, but that is who Tech is. And there's so many things hanging over this episode of how war and fighting doesn't necessarily solve all the situations. Definitely doesn't here. You got the great Teo. Offense is the best cook along, and that leads to this, finding different ways to solve problems and how you can be part of that. And that's where I think it flows back to this Tech stuff and what you're saying here, including Omega. Who Omega is key to this episode. Who Wrecker is meats on sticks, key to this episode. But it all going to Tech and how, it's not just simply, again, even Teo's poking fun at him, but it's just, it's powerful. And you talked about rigidity. I wrote that too, of rigidity versus flowing, which doesn't mean this episode is about Tech going, you know what? I'm throwing away my charts. It's quite the opposite. It's quite the opposite. It's what you're saying. No, I'm taking who I am into a situation where I have to adapt or find things out or just try or get out of my comfort zone, right? He's not a racer. But here he is taking his skills into this, and he comes out a victor. And it's, again, not just about winning, but I love that. It's a big, powerful lesson. Who you are is what you are. And run with it.
Yeah, and you don't need to be defining yourself isn't necessarily going to limit yourself, I think, is a part of what it is. And to just kind of walk through some of the beats, like the script is written very well to really highlight this. We know this about Tech. It's part of what I love about him, of like, a lot of the way he describes things is comedy, but it's comedy that comes from truth. Like when Omega asked about the Clone Wars, and he just sort of defined it like in this dictionary way that does not capture any of the, horror, right? And we laugh, but it's also like, but it's the truth of who Tech is. It's the way he processes things, and that can risk limiting you. And this episode reminds us, he comments multiple times being kind of obsessive and pedantic about analyzing and categorizing things. Yeah. Early on, he talks about, the appropriate uses of the Bad Batch's skills to Sid. He's talking about the job that Echo and Hunter on, and says, I would not call transporting 50 cases of Nerf nuggets a mission, nor is it a proper use of our skill set. He comments on the speeder's original specs, right? He says this is a 12 series speeder. They're not built for racing speed or durability, but they're being adapted. And then he observes accurately that their normal tactics, what he and Wrecker have been brought along for muscle, their military tactics won't resolve the situation when Sid is kidnapped. He literally saying we cannot apply our military tactics to this situation. So he's really in this place of analyzing everything is defined by skill set. I even thought early on in the episode when Sid is giving them a mission and saying, I just need muscle. I thought the episode was going to be about like, what is Tech going to do alone on Ord Mantell when he gets left behind?
That could have been great.
It was so narrow focused to like, I thought he was going to be like, okay, well, I'll stay here and keep repairing this data pad or whatever he was doing, because it's so much about record skills. So like even in this mission, she's like, well, Tech, you can come along too. I guess you're okay in a fight, but what I really need is this hunk of meat record to punch something if needed, right? So there's even that sort of trapped by his defined skill sets. And then, as you pointed out, obviously he's mocked by Teo that he can't be a racer. You're doing it all wrong, human. And it is all about strategy and skill, of which you have zero, all that. And this is obviously clear, but I just kind of wanted to walk through it because I appreciate how well it's constructed to remind us of all these things about Tech. And really that kind of hinge moment where he could say, hey, everyone is right. My skill sets are X, Y, or Z. So and they can only be applied here.
Yeah.
But that real growth moment, there's that nice shot of him just alone studying the track right before Teo comes up to him and gets smashed, right?
Yeah.
Where it really does feel like a real world time and place where somebody has said, you're good at, whatever it is, you're good at wrestling. So you shouldn't, try to write this poem.
Right.
Right. And the person who's good at wrestling thinks, how am I good at wrestling? How can I translate? How would a wrestler write a poem that maybe somebody else wouldn't think to write because they're a wrestler, And the way he doesn't deny his skills, but he applies them to this new task. And in it really defies conventional wisdom about how the race needs to be run. I thought it was such a great part of this.
I really love you highlighting that moment there. I think that's something, here's this lesson in front of our faces, but at times we might all fall victim to thinking about that, about other people when you don't even intend to. You just kind of meet someone in a certain world. You're mentioning wrestling. I met a lot of pro wrestlers. We have a listener, Outlaw Adam Knight, wrestler, but also an author. And you can sometimes be like, oh, really? You write? You write? You know how to write? And it's just, you don't mean it. You don't intend it, but we kind of all go through life with a little bit of Teo's view until maybe you're faced with it yourself. I think that was also the reminder. It was empowering for Tech, but also don't be a Teo. Don't be a Teo even when you don't know about it.
Yeah, I was really affected by Teo is funny, a great comedy character. There is the racer with an ego kind of character going on with him. But honestly, it reminded me of lots of things in real life. Everything from running higher end copy machines at Kinko's to screenwriting, where I think sometimes people can use the knowledge that they have is definitely a way to gatekeep, right? This is the way it is done. I have this knowledge, and because you don't have this knowledge, only I can give it to you, and you can't do it a different way, right?
Yeah.
It's almost designed to keep you in a box sometimes, right? Follow this rigid outline. I am the one who sets the way this goes. And there's a little bit of that real world stuff going on with Teo where he's like, this is exactly how you race. Don't go off and do something creative. Don't look at it from a totally different perspective. Almost like this fear of like, but because if somebody else looks at it from a different perspective, then maybe I don't get to be the expert anymore.
Yeah, man, this episode would be great at a corporate weekend about how to approach problems differently, wouldn't it?
It really was. And, this is where I'm saying of like, I think all of these ideas are in the episode, but what makes an episode like this rich to me is it can spiral out to real life experiences. I think everybody could probably look at this. And if you're at a retreat and you were given an essay assignment of when have you been Tech and when has somebody been Teo to you? I bet everyone has a story.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I had an exchange this past weekend at a comedy club where, someone's like, oh, you wrote a Star Wars book and you have a Star Wars hat on. And they were talking about Star Wars and they weren't being negative, but they're like, I don't know. You know what I like about Star Wars? It's fake. I go, okay. And he goes, yeah, then everyone just applies all this meaning that's not really there to it. And we attach it to our lives. And I just was like, I mean, but if the meaning's there, it's there. And this is a great episode for that. You and I are connecting to these real world things because it's there. It inspires it. It's a thought starter and it's a silly race. It's all of it. It's all of it. And this is the power of Star Wars. This is why I think I really love this episode. I became immediately protective of it. And I didn't need to, by the way. I was pre-defensive. I was ready to go into war for this episode for people to be like, just a silly, stupid racing one. And maybe there's some people, but I'm not seeing that online just because I thought this is just right. So much. Yeah, so much.
Yeah, I think it's just moving for Tech because it just is not a denial of who he is. It is in some ways a reinforcement of who he is, but it also just like absolutely opens everything up for him, right? That it's an acknowledgement that he controls how his skills are deployed, right? It's just him problem solving, of going like, well, normally this would be a violent scenario, but that's not going to work because we're maybe a little bit outgunned and outnumbered, and then they'll just come after us anyway, so that can't resolve it. So there isn't any ego, right? It's not like he's trying to prove himself. He's being very Tech.
Yeah.
And trying to figure it out. And he's so analytical. It's almost fun to think like on the flight home, is he like making an organized list of what other challenges his skill set could be applied to that he didn't really go like, hey, wait, actually it's not just combat or piloting. You can study and analyze anything, and I can apply my skill set to cooking, poetry, galactic domination if I wanted. I could be a quiz show host. Here's all the things I could do with my skill set if I looked at it from a different perspective.
No, I love this, and almost in my summary, looking at text thing, and there's much more to discuss about text, but like you said, it's a confirmation of who he is. This wasn't a lesson of, this could have gone the direction of, look, you live your life by your charts and you need to let go of that. It wasn't really that. He takes a lot of big risks. He moves outside the box, as you keep saying. The skill set doesn't need to keep in the box. And I really love that. It was so respectful of the character of Tech and therefore respectful of people who identify with Tech. At least I hope. I'd say that's you. I hope you felt respected.
Yeah, no, I felt extremely validated, Yeah. And I think the other part of it to me that's powerful of Tech's specific journey is that I do think it reflects the entire Bad Batch's journey, right? This isn't like just a one-off. It's not just about Tech. This episode is about his personal sort of awakening. But this idea that they need to be true to themselves while evolving, right? They've had everything they know ripped away. They've had their identity and their purpose ripped away. And now they have to figure out how to be themselves while also changing, And it's in a way, there's this meta level of that too, that the Bad Batch start out almost as, obviously they've always had depth and meaning, but on the surface level, they really start as almost just a riff on 80s cartoons, right? Or A-Team, like we always make the joke of like, they're so defined by types, right? Here's the leader, here's the dumb muscle, here's the nerd, here's the silent badass with Crosshair, that idea that we're almost complicit in it is the audience, that's how they start, is almost these marketing stereotypes. And now we get to go deeper and deeper and deeper in the way that they choose to define themselves.
Oh, man, you just said something that's really powerful about just change overall. Change is not about leaving everything behind, right? It's keeping your core as you evolve and unfolding different layers within you, but it's still you. I love that kind of stuff. It's been very important in my last couple of years. And I'm waiting for that Wrecker solo episode where he writes a poem. It's still about weeds on sticks.
I really hope maybe all the solo episodes is Sid keeps getting captured and like, well, the only way out of this one is for Wrecker to write a poem. That'd be great. So what other thoughts do you have on Tech's journey or other big picture themes in this episode?
At the risk of repeating myself on Tech, I'll move to some stuff with Sid and just some of the things that I think this episode did touch upon. it's so that this thing that's at the core of Andor. How did you phrase it so well? The personal versus the ideological, right?
Yeah.
I thought there was some of that and personal over professional, where Sid's in trouble because it's all personal for her. Like some lessons on passion and gambling in this episode.
Right. So you just took it as that there is that line of like, given your history, it seems like it's personal. That you think that it's Sid obviously needs money, wants money, is worried about probably kind of hoarding before the Imperial hammer comes down. But you feel like she wants to get Malegi back.
Yeah, I just felt, and that ties into, because that leads them into bigger problems that need to be solved with tech and this idea, I put it all down already, but like war/fighting can't necessarily solve this one, whereas Teo believes it's as is, and you attack, and all of these big lessons kind of emerge from, if Sid just didn't have this personal vendetta, we might not be in some of these bigger problems. Which raises these questions about Sid or the real Sid. I actually really love that scene, and again, shout out to Ernie Hudson getting the call here into Star Wars. It's Ernie Malegi, that scene where they have a history, they have a friendship, they have some sort of kinship in this smuggler bounty scoundrel world they've been in and are in, and Malegi having this idea of that's who you are. That's who you are, and that's part of his warning. And you know what? We'll see if that warning plays out, but at least in this moment, you get a sense that she doesn't want to have that life anymore. Just feels that she's moved on, but doesn't know how. And so it's a real question. I think the question of Sid, has she changed, is something she's asking. I think she wants to say she has, but she's still who she is. And can she evolve and move forward? And it's framed as an ominous question at the end. But all of this kind of begins, again, with her a little bit of a personal problem that gets them all into a lot of trouble. So I think some big lessons can come out of that.
Yeah, no, I think there's like all these great ideas about, trust and found family. And you're right, they do dovetail with, Tech is showing that he can adapt, and can Sid adapt, right?
Yeah.
And I love that gets laid out as well, that Tech is, suspicious of Sid. He's got that great quote of, this is not the first time she has required our assistance due to her dealings with individuals of questionable integrity.
Exactly.
It's like a problematic pattern, I believe he calls it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that when Malegi has her and they are, in his lounge, and he's like, yeah, you're not gonna change. I know who you are. And there's a great shot of her kind of half in the light, half in the shadows. And look, she really does look like she wants to change, right? Like she doesn't want that to be true, right?
Right.
But I think so much of it goes to who Omega is, right? And is the presence of this kid who keeps reaching out, who keeps trying to connect, who keeps trying to be hopeful. Is that, part of what's making a dent in Sid's heart? I think Sid probably does have some empathy for these lost, confused clones who had everything taken from them. But I just kind of feel like the central thing with Sid is a little bit of that classic Star Wars philosophy. Are we stronger together? Can you take the risk to trust, to love? That makes you feel vulnerable. Or at the end of the day, is it like, look, I've been around. The galaxy's a hard place. You need to look out for number one above all else. I mean, it's so classic Star Wars. It starts in the first film with Han, right? And I feel like that's kind of what that ominous, ending with Malegi is setting up, is a conflict where Sid can do the right thing, but it goes against every instinct she's learned in a really hard life in a really hard galaxy.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that plays is there's an actual, I think, a care for her from Omega, and leading to this idea of Omega's not going to do nothing. We're not going to turn her back. We're going to find a way, even though she doesn't know it. And hopefully that's the kind of thing that can anchor Sid as she moves to a different part. We'll see if she picks up on it,
Yeah. Talking about the Omega of it all, you mentioned a couple times that there is, a good thread of, what are our other options beyond fighting? This is classic, Obi-Wan Kenobi saying in the first film, we can't win, but there are alternatives to fighting. And this episode, I think, really underlined that. The fact that it starts as Sid we're going to a rough and tumble place. I'm going to make a bet that might not work out, and then I'm going to need you boneheads to throw down.
Yeah.
Your muscle, I didn't bring you along for the conversation. And when it comes down to a fight, it is, Omega who at first offers that different solution, which I thought was really interesting because without being heavy handed, it did sort of tied to the first two episodes, right? Where they were so clearly about how different characters define treasure. And she so needed to get that money. And what Omega is doing, following up on that, is when she makes that counter bet, it's basically like, yeah, no, we don't need money from you if we win. We just need Sid back. Sid's our reward. That was really putting a highlight on this idea that what Omega is valuing is people and her connection to them.
Yeah, and that being at the center of a lot of, I think, what Echo's talking about, and this idea of we're not going to do nothing with who we are, I think that's central to what's at play with the Bad Batch as they move forward. Again, see, this is from that post-it note I had ready to defend this episode. It's real central and at the center of this story overall, and I thought it was at play, and just to hear it from Omega, and it's not framed as naivete. It's not framed as just simply desperate. It is from the heart. It is for an actual genuine care and concern for Sid. That's our friend. We want it back. And for even Malegi, one of those scoundrels with honor, it would seem, which is why he even does warn them. Hey, it's admirable, but watch yourself. I thought it was all real big, well played. Like I said, heavy-handed in the most wonderful way.
Just continuing the growth in the themes, which I thought was great. It's not like she stepped out and she's like, I learned sometimes treasure is people. But I did think that was great after that real focus on needing money, and the wonderful Sereno male saying, no, hey, have a toy. That she doesn't barter for money, she just barters for Sid. And the whole episode had a great there are alternatives to fighting. There are other ways to win, right? It's not about let's just walk away. It's that maybe that's not the best way to win. Tech dropping his weapons pack is so great, right? It is, that's like Luke shutting off the targeting computer in terms of just seeing it from a different perspective. But that idea that obsessing on offense, obsessing on being the muscle might be what's stopping you from winning.
Absolutely not taking down that path on the left, the red path, the one walked off. You're going to lock yourself into this perpetual combat or riot race going on.
Yep, which wouldn't be all bad. The perpetual riot race, that'd be fun. Yeah. What other thoughts do you have, big picture wise?
That was kind of all of it on the table there. It all kind of rolled together so nicely, and I could say this, I don't know, half joking, but it's like all the themes at play and every other piece of Star Wars content are just as present here. And it's what I love about this stuff. All wrapped up in a fun, fast package, literally, and it was just a joy to watch that and push out to bigger parts of Star Wars.
Yeah, it's just such a thrill to be so rooting for Tech, right? To surprise people, to do well, and to win this race, and then to get the Anakin Skywalker from the Phantom Menace shot of waving at the crowd. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to discuss some of those great comedy moments, some of those great action moments, some of the Phantom Menace pod race of it all that in just a moment. And we are back to continue our discussion of Season 2, Episode 4 of The Bad Batch, Faster. Let's get into the action in an episode called Faster. I was kind of surprised when I watched this the second time, because I watched the first time, I thought about it, made some notes about the big picture ideas, and I was like, can't wait to write down all those comedy moments and action moments. A lot of comedy moments. There aren't a ton of action moments. It's really about the race, which I really appreciated when we watched the second time, is there really isn't any, punch and blaster fire, anything. So how did you feel about the way the action was distributed overall? And did you have some favorite moments?
I'm glad you said that, because I thought I had a little more time this morning to go into some individual moments, and all I ended up writing was favorite action moment: riot racing.
Right?
It's just kind of it. The episode, it is it's certainly a trick of the trade, but the episode does such a good job of showing you the first race, showing you beats that are gonna happen again, because it sets up the framework of this is the dangers, this is what could go wrong, this is the little buzzer that comes out and takes you out, and a lot of that is it's how you do it. You show those stakes so that when our hero is put in that situation, you feel it, and you also want to you might know Tech's gonna win. Maybe you thought that the second the episode started, right? Maybe you mentioned it earlier, like, oh, I can kind of see where it's going, but it's the journey and the lessons that emerge. But wrapped in that is these three wonderful race sequences that are so Star Wars. The sound design was amazing. I saw Debbie Collins tweet out about it, that it has it's next to episode 1 in terms of just the sound design, heavy lifting that had to be done. It is, and it worked. And so there's a lot of those individual moments. The race itself, those little doors coming up, all those, it just, that hallway with is it advertising on the side? It looks like when you go through the tunnel, just all those details. I don't know if I have a specific moment, unless you count Teo being run over by a riot racer in the pits, which was hilarious as well as full of action. So yeah, I'm with you on that there. Just an overall feel.
Yeah. And I wrestled with whether Teo getting smashed was an action moment or a comedy moment.
Right.
I went for comedy. We'll discuss it more in a moment. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was just like the kind of the thrill of the environment, and there are definitely some specific beats within the racing. But I really like that violence hung over this entire episode, and then it was mostly about the racing. Not that the racing wasn't violent, and a random crowd member got shot. So hey, some violence.
He died.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I'm kind of just hoping Arcona's having organs in different places, and he'll be okay. But I did like Teo's first crash and seeing the claw maneuver. That was cool. Great setup, and the actual crash was cool and effective. I think in Tech's race, a couple of the actual shots that I like the most is the weapons drop. Not only is that obviously a clear and important idea in the story, but just the actual action of it, of kind of the pleasing ka-chunk of dropping it. And then it's animated so well when he has more speed maneuverability and just takes off. It's got that heart of racing of wow, look at him go. And then the other action moment that I specifically wanted to shout out is that the final shot of Tech's victory, I feel like most people probably knew, I think Tech's going to win, right? But the great setup there of I think a more straightforward thing would have been hey, he pulls the great maneuver where the violence that the two racers are trying to inflict on him gets inflicted on them instead, and he zips through to a clear victory. I love that in the carnage of their collapse, you couldn't tell who was coming. That was just a cool, fresh, interesting way to do the tension and to do the victory shot. Yeah,
I really agree with that. I thought it was well-crafted race storytelling all the way through.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you think of any other action moments, or maybe there's some action moments in our comedy, we will find out. We're going to move on to favorite moments of comedy, whimsy, and weirdness. I got a lot. Maybe I'll need to edit myself. What do you got, Ken?
I'll concede the floor to you here in a second, because there's a lot of things all the way through, but some general stuff. I do. I think you mentioned already, but you might mention it here too. But just transporting Nerf nuggets. The Bad Batch introducing so many wonderful names for snacks in this galaxy that sound like they belong at a theme park, and I mean that in a good way. Ronto wraps and all those kind of things you can get at Bed 2 in our real world. Now I want Nerf nuggets. I'm a fan of chicken nuggets. I'm a fan of vegan chicken nuggets. Really, a couple of brands I absolutely love. So I perked up at that. I'm like, is this coming to a Anaheim near me? Because I want some Nerf nuggets.
Nerf nuggets was a great turn of phrase. And, since this episode was so much about skill sets, I was thinking about, Hunter's enhanced senses. And I was like, is that poor guy stuck just smelling Nerf nuggets for days?
Love it.
Yeah, that was a great one. What else you got?
So shout out to Ben Schwartz comes in and says this character Teo, and the first viewing I had, I was like, this droid's kind of annoying, and I was like, well, yeah, that's the point. Don't you just kind of want to punch him? And I just thought it starts from the beginning. When you're the first interaction, that great line of, "Oh, you have a problem with droids, human?" Like it's just the way the condescension behind it. It was so effective. It was a really effective use of a character and their traits, where you're. I don't want to be mean. I'm not rooting against him. But I don't. It just worked for me. It was very effective, and it started with that line.
Yeah. No, that Ben Schwartz, a successful comedian, very good at comedy. Yeah. And played the character well, and I think found some, surprising delivery. I liked the self, the referring to himself in the third person,
Right.
and I liked the delivery on Teo is an artist.
I like that. There was a great moment of, I just love the style of comedy too, where it's like she's like, save it for a race, and he's like, oh yeah, definitely. I was going to save it for the race. And just the really hitting hitting the syllables in that sentence was wonderful.
Yeah. So lots of fun Teo stuff. I did think that the dark joke of one of the spectators falling to blaster fire, followed by the announcer voice of a friendly reminder to all our spectators: be mindful of blaster fire. I have a dark sense of humor about warnings that are like, they're almost just legal, right? You have to give them, but then they really reveal like, cool. So thanks for the sign that there are wolves. How should I be cautious of wolves? Or like my favorite road sign that I see a lot in like hills in California is there's, the yellow diamond, there's a car, and then there are just rocks falling. And like, I get that you're warning me that rocks could fall at any time, and maybe if I happen to see one falling ahead, great. But it feels like that sign is there to just let me know, like, just a reminder, a rock could fall on you from above at any time. That will be the end of you, and you won't know it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Anyway, enjoy your drive.
Yep. We are now no longer legally obligated for safety here. Yep.
Yeah, and just the be mindful of blaster fire was great. Cool. They ducked. They all seemed pretty mindful. What else are they going to do?
It was I got that dark strain of humor too, and I got no problem with this character taking a blaster shot to the chest here, even if it's dead. It was the if they're gonna do it, lean into it, and they leaned into it. The beat, the moment, the silence, the awkward fall, and then the announcer at the end. It was a perfect package of dark humor.
Yeah, absolutely, and I was glad that they just went for it. Some other moments for you.
You had a reference it, I think, earlier, but I love a lot of the Sid stuff all the time, and shout out again to Rhea Perlman, but just the way she delivers it. If you want to step in here, I didn't bring you two for the company. It's just, you want to step in here is so real world to me in the most wonderful ways. It's not a joke that takes me out of Star Wars. It's such the character, and I just hear Carla, and of course I hear Carla because that's what I should be hearing, and I just love that beat. She continues to surprise me. It's one of the things where you get the character, and she's got her little insults and goggles and this and that, and those all work for me. But then it's these particular moments where it's just extra special for me to have Rhea Perlman doing this character.
Absolutely. I wrote that down too. I think that was probably my favorite Sid line. I didn't bring you two for the company because it's funny, but it's again one of those jokes that reveals truth. Like that's her whole thing of like, I've got you in your little skill set boxes. I brought you here for exactly that. Hey, this is the thing I brought you here for. You bleepers.
Get to it. And the fact that even then, that you got all three of them, but especially Wrecker, like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right. Right.
Yeah, some beautiful Wrecker moments. Another Teo moment I did like is the utter panic on where are my arms and legs. That was good. Yeah, I mean, there's a joke that we've seen with sentient creatures, droids, gingerbread people, being shocked by the state of their body, but it was funny, very successful. The Teo hit was great because I was expecting Teo to be out, so Tech needed to be in, but I didn't see it coming in that moment. And the thing that really can convince me to put it in comedy rather than action, I didn't notice, but on the second viewing, the pilot gets out of their crash speeder and does the little shrug at him, like, "What are you going to do?"
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes, because again, I think in the wrong hands, these could be criticisms against the show. Well, I knew that was coming. That's not. It's shock and surprise is not always storytelling. You let go of that and go with the journey. So yes, I'm with you. It was like, all right, well, when's Teo going to go? And they play with that. They absolutely give you a second beat. And the beat is very poignant. He's talking about, no, you got to look around, off, boom. And then the button being the casual walking away, the shrug of, what are you going to do? I thought pitch perfect comedy.
And there is some catharsis in it. In the Teo in that moment is the person who is telling you you can't do things this way. Only I am the holder of the knowledge. Bye.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yep. There's some other great stuff with the announcer and with Tech's race. That's where I'm going next. So, what did you like in all that?
So here, Jonathan Lippau is the announcer. You and I have discussed this many times. It's been discussed for 20 odd years now. Announcers and racing in Star Wars, it sometimes can hit and sometimes it can miss. I think I've become protective of Fodes and Bede, but also, it was a thing I rubbed against for years and maybe still do. And I know you've expressed some decisions, some thoughts in your head on that character and how it was used in but so when it started happening again, I literally thought to myself, well, here we go again. Like, how are they going to do this? And it ended up working really well. There's some very real world comedy beats, but it just played differently. And I really, all the way through it, I enjoyed it, including, Tech is that his name? I love that as a tool, and it worked for me.
Yeah. I think I love the concept of Foden beat. At this point, I'm just used to them, so I just enjoy the beats. I don't care what universe you're from, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah.
They will never be entirely for me because it is just kind of pulling in, at the time, a very real world SNL and everywhere else joke. If it was in the 2010s, it'd be like, I think I just threw up in my mouth a little, like, yep, we all know that joke. Great.
Yep.
This worked for me because there was a little bit more darkness under the satire, right? Because I think of like the blaster fire thing, and because it's like an announcer for a extremely dangerous, awful riot racing, and that kind of almost like that corporate, trying to put a corporate patina on it gave it this extra darkness, right? Of like, I felt like there was a little bit of character in the announcer, because the announcer is the person like, I'm the one who has to put a happy face on everything regardless of how messed up it is. And all the Tech stuff was great, of like, I could almost see like a cutting to whatever this announcer was. I kind of like that we didn't really see him, that he could be like, hey, I'm trying to make this sound exciting. And you put this guy last on the lineup. Guy got no notes on. His name's just Tech. You're like, work with me. That was when I realized. I mean, the Tech, and then the sound kind of going out a little bit. Was great. But I really liked it. Is that his name? Tech? Just Tech? Funny joke, and also one of those things that makes you pull back and kind of look at the fact that they are all kind of just named for their their skill sets, their types.
There was I didn't write down all the names, but there were some wonderful racing names, and ode to a character being named after Bosco. One of the directors, I love that. Quick Draw, whatever his name was, and then little.
I wrote them all down so we can talk.
About it.
Good. I want to talk about it in Canon, because I'm really curious about your feelings on the closeness to Phantom Menace. So one of my absolute favorite comedy lines in this entire thing goes to your guy Wrecker. When Omega tells Wrecker that Tech is last, he calls him on the comm and says, Tech, you got to be in front to win. Like, this was valuable mission critical information that Tech didn't know.
God bless you, Wrecker. God bless you.
Oh, an absolute winner. An absolute winner.
You're a great NFL color commentator. The team with the more points is going to win today, Al. Yeah.
They got to get out there and try. Like, yeah. For a tech-focused episode, I felt like other people had the comedy lines. The tech line that did make me really laugh is when he asks Omega to send the specs of the left tunnel to his data pad, and Wrecker says, "Shouldn't you just focus on not getting blown up?" And Tech says, "I can do both."
Yeah, I can do both. Oh,
it's a good one. Any other comedy moments for you?
The big victory moment. You did it. You sound surprised. I mean, I like that.
Yeah, nice and straightforward. All right, then in that case, let's get to the canon, the lore connections. There's a lot of just kind of references to other things, but the big thing to me is, pod racing. How did you feel big picture about this episode, feeling like it was an homage to the Phantom Menace's pod racing scene? It wasn't just another racing, another type of racing introduced in Star Wars. There was so much about it, from the announcer to that long introduction of the racers, felt in specific like a nod, like a tip of the hat to Phantom Menace. How did you feel about all that?
I really loved it. There was even a shot of just kind of seeing our group watching a race. It was almost even framed like some of the shots in episode 1 of Shmi and Padme and everyone watching Anakin on the iPad before we knew what that was. I loved it. And for me, it becomes personal because in the years in which I was wrestling with my feelings on episode 1, or trying to go, well, I liked a lot of the themes I was picking up on, but I'm moving away from that movie along with society, because snark is cool, but also, hey, there's some things that are maybe legitimate. And in that period of time, one of the things that kept me anchored to the movie was the pod race, the sound design in it, just the design of the pods, everything about it. And most of the racers, we've talked about some of the racers in their big racing outfits that I don't love, but rats and everyone about it. It's special in my heart because of that. It kept me close to that film when I was ready to push far away from it, push myself away from the table, so to speak. And so to just kind of see this episode come along and have some direct homages to it, and the feel and the energy, and then also introducing a new kind of racing, which almost seems like an evolution of pod racing, right? As pod racing changed or something like that. It's an offshoot. You got NASCAR, you got funny cars, you got all different styles of racing. So you might as well have this. And I enjoyed it. And therefore, I think it's not just about a tip of the cap to the prequel generation that loved the pod races. It's just to this sequence that I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who might have wrestled with the film, but like what was going on there, and it kept you close when you wanted to run away.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I always liked the pod race. That was a criticism back in the day for people my age, that it was too long or whatever. But I enjoyed it. I wrestled initially with the really different design of aliens. I think Lucas just really feeling like, I don't have to have creatures in suits or Muppets. I can do whatever I want. And, you get Ben Quadraneros, who did not look like, at the time, quote unquote, Star Wars to me. It's once I got past that, I really started to look forward whenever I watched The Phantom Menace, specifically to the introduction of all of them, and really starting to appreciate all of the not just the design work, but the performances. I will always love Clegg Holdfast's little, like, what you think you're at a royal dinner with your vibes way off from everybody else, Clegg. And Team Toe and the whole gang. So this whole episode, when I was like, I really like that this isn't just pod racing, that this is like pod racing with the gloves off. It feels like people like, how everybody kind of just knows quietly that pod racers cheat and try to murder one another. How that's just kind of a whispered, agreed upon thing. Let's not whisper anymore.
Yeah.
Let's have a weapons pack. We're doing it.
Love that.
Yeah. So it felt like great. And I was so happy to have just the roll call, because you were seeing bits and pieces of them in the race, and the roll call. So you can just like slow down, read it, watch them. It was just so much fun and so much flavor of just like, if we're going to do this, let's have fun with it. Right.
Yeah.
So the list was Jet Venom, then Bosco the Mad Bomber Bricks, Steel Claw Kane, Vicious Vid Santari, Haxon the War Gnome, Trajanix, Quick Draw Quasar, the Trickster, Flash Raktor, and Hyper Rod on his 7-deuce blaster. So even some of that Phantom Menace thing of, so and so with this, kind of engine.
Yeah. You reminded me of another comedy beat I loved. It's maybe understated, but Bosco Mad Bomber. What's his last name?
Bricks.
Bosco Mad Bomber Bricks. So then he drops like the little grenades, and the announcer's like, "Mad Bomber up to his old tricks." It's like the leopard biting your face off party with leopard biting your face off. Like it's like, yeah, that's what he does. He's called the Mad Bomber, and he
that beat made me feel like this Riot Racing was sort of like racing meets pro wrestling, right? Like we're actually, people would be bummed if Mad Bomber didn't drop his bombs. That's his shtick, and they expect it.
Yes, right? Like I went to a race and Mad Bomber did not drop his bombs. Money back, please. Yeah.
Yeah. What, Bosco No Bombs? Is that your name now? Come on.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't stopped and paused to write down this list, I would have missed Quick Draw Quasar, the battle droid with some purple paint, doing a little finger guns gesture.
It's the best. It's so cheesy in the best way. I love it.
It's so great. Yeah. So then the other kind of canon thing to talk about is that, hey, we got a lot of different species and droids. Jet Venom is Nosorian, the same as our beloved Clegg Holdfast. Did you feel like that was too on the nose, or were you happy to be like, oh, well, this is a species who's great at racing?
Jet species. That's exactly what I thought. Species is great at racing. Yeah, absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved that.
Yeah, and it's set up with, Anakin's whole, like, humans can't usually do this.
Yep.
And then we had a commando droid, we had a protocol droid, we had the repurposed battle droid. How did you feel about seeing, not that long after the Clone Wars, these droids who'd found new uses?
I loved it. It's, talk about changing and you're not in a box. You get to go race now. And I love the one that kind of emerges into the seat during the announcement. I love that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every single one is a great shot. Great to see protocol droids. The protocol droids will always be, 3PO is the base. So great to see variations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of species-wise, of course, Malegi is a Duwatan, like Grumgar from The Force Awakens. Great to see that variety. How'd you feel about that?
Love that. Grumgar has always been one of my favorite characters just because it's Grumgar. Look at him. So, yeah, it worked for me.
Yeah. And I feel like the physical presence of an existing, species in Star Wars that is massive, right? It was great to see a Gamorrean with a blaster.
yeah, and
but it kind of felt like the let's back down. We don't need to have this fight was partially because Malegi himself would throw down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Even him pouring those drinks, those big mitts pouring those drinks. That's a big guy. I don't want to fight with that guy.
Yeah, and great to see his giant pinky held out as he drank.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Of course, we had some holochess, some Dejeric at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Wrecker ever can beat Omega at Dejeric?
I think you're going to get. I want it to be a running bit that ends with him about to win, and something happens, and he never does.
Denied. Love it. I think this was the first time we got Sid's full name as well, right? Sidrin Scaleback.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Sidrin Scaleback.
Yeah. How do you feel? Do you like it?
I do like it. Here's why. There would be a time where he wouldn't like that. But also it's a very Star Wars name. We talked about going back to the Andor of it all, and our friend Brian Ward saying Andor's for Star Wars fans who maybe are embarrassed about being Star Wars fans. It's a general comment, of course. But I really connect with that because I've run into that in the real world, right? Where just like, are you a Star Wars fan or do you hate Dexter Jetster? Because that's the balance. This episode is not embarrassed about being a Star Wars fan. Scale back and Quick Draw Quasar and Riot Racing, calling back to the Phantom Menace. This is a celebration of all the weird things in Star Wars. All the things that maybe you might not want to sit down and show someone on their first viewing of Star Wars, which I do get, by the way. Big alien creatures, Gamorrean guards. It's all there. It's the wild, wondrous side of Star Wars that we love talking about so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that full name, Scale Back, it's on one hand, it's like, yeah, no, I get it. She's a Trandoshan. Like, also, like, Yeah, no, I mean, some people's last name farmers because their ancestors were farmers.
Yeah, yeah.
Not that weird. And it just got a wonderful flow to it. Citterin's scale back. Love it. Final canon thing I noted is I liked the announcer describing the left tunnel as Nellis Express to Lotho Minor. Lotho Minor being the junk planet where half of Maul hung out for a few years, staying alive through sheer desire for revenge. Yeah. So, any other canon thoughts?
No, I think we really hit it all. I do, like I said, the homage to pod racing down, even some of the shots, it would seem, was one of my favorite things.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, was there anything that you disliked or questioned in this episode?
That it was too short. No, I think the only thing going into it and coming out of it was like I had some questions about when you place this episode, and again, would it be a letdown in some ways? But it ended up playing really well, especially after we did that deep dive last week on the episode. I just thought this is what was needed. It's just as deep in so many ways, but it helped kind of even out my emotions going forward in Bad Batch.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Teo was extremely effective. Did the job exactly needed as that character. I maybe would have taken one or two less moments of Teo being a lot. The moments that worked for me were really good, but Teo was very extra, as the kids probably have stopped saying.
And that one went. I missed that. I didn't know an extra was a term. Oh boy.
Yeah. But ultimately, yeah, a lot of great funny stuff with Teo, and extremely cathartic to have this figure who is doubting and judging and controlling get not hoisted by his own petard, but hit by a speeder. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to touch on? Kevin Kiner, once again, coming through some great music, and we have Star Wars club music. We actually have some Star Wars EDM club music to play. You talk about the background music in the parlor? Yeah.
No, in the race itself.
Oh yeah.
It does show up a few times, but in the race when they're going, it's something special. I loved it.
Oh yeah, no, there's some great racing music. I was really hooked on the music in the beginning when Wrecker and Omega are playing Jarek, and there's like this background music that's internal. It's the music in Sid's parlor. It's not the soundtrack, right?
Yeah.
Because we just had a question about music in Star Wars, and I really liked that it was slow. It was, It's like somebody's like, okay, you want electronica for your bar, right? But what if it's really sad and no one's there, and it's like Tuesday morning? Here's some sad, lazy electronica for your bar that doesn't have a lot going on.
Yeah. That's great. It's great.
This is super great. Other thing I want to be sure to shout out. So the animators, and the director, went to town finding all these fun moments from, Quick Draw Quasar's finger guns. But I really enjoyed, especially in the second viewing, Teo's flippy face. That instead of turning his whole body, was flipping his face around. That was really cool.
I don't think I picked up on that until the second viewing, so it was a great little design.
Yeah. We always like to wrap up with some fun. I think we've been having fun throughout the episode. Yes. But if you could have a figure or merch of any kind from this episode, who or what do you want?
Come on. I'm going to, until I get it, I'm going to call for my pod racing game. But now you have Riot Racing. You have a racing game at your fingertips. What circuit do you want to go into? Who's your racer? You got these different tracks. There's so much in there, so much to play. Mario Kart is one of the greatest games of all time for a reason. Give me Star Wars Mario Kart. Riot Racing.
Yeah. Come on, yeah, Star Wars Riot Racer, please. That would be so great. I'm going to keep saying it until it happens. I wish that they would just make the Bad Batch in vintage format. The 3 3/4 figures. They got a Hunter coming out, so I'm going to be selfish and I say I hope Tech is next. Maybe I'll pick up the Black Series Tech, but man, I really want my Tech figure. One of my favorite characters. There was another background character, kind of a variation on a model that they've used a decent amount. We've talked about it before. It starts happening in the Clone Wars. It's happened in Bad Batch, where there's, some very specific in slightly inaccurate dress of some of the Cantina characters in their original Kenner figure form. Before it was Ponda Baba and Momana Dunn. It was a Walrus Man and Hammerhead. And they had weird, brightly colored jazzercise jumpsuits.
That's right. That's right.
And they've used that before, where there'll be an Aqualish with the Walrus Man colors and an Ithorian with the Hammerhead colors. But in the establishing shot where the gang is getting to Safatoma, this new planet, there's what appears to be a tipsy Walrus Man with a bit of a beer gut in the classic Walrus Man action figure outfit. So I want an action figure of tipsy Walrus Man with beer gut.
Tipsy Walrus Man. That needs to be the description on the package.
Yeah, and then with beer gut, like it's an accessory.
Yes.
All right. Any other thoughts?
No, man, fun episode, fun discussion. I was really excited to get to this, just as I was excited with last week's Deeper, Darker, Solitary Clone. Love it.
Yeah, no, I think they're really partners. One is the Solitary Clone is dark and harrowing. This episode, Faster, it's light, it's fun, it's really validating. But they both have that really great Star Wars storytelling of minimal stories that evoke all these big ideas. And I really appreciate it, excited by it, can't wait to watch the next episode of Bad Batch.
Love it.
And with that, Ken, you want to let people know where they can find us?
Absolutely. Thank you for listening or finding us. We're the Force Center Podcast. We are on Twitter at Force Center Pod. We are also on Hive Social, if you're over there at Force Center. Facebook page is Force Center Podcast. We are on Instagram. And don't forget, we are on YouTube. We are asking you, if you want to consider subscribing to the channel, it would help us reach our next goal of 7,000 subscribers. We've got new things coming over there on YouTube, like figure fights in February and more. Stick around for that. Podcast available on a lot of different spots. Just search, you'll find us. tpublic.com/user/Force Center is where you can buy merch. Get some for Star Wars Celebration, because we'll be there in London and we want to find you in a crowd. And you can support us directly at patreon.com/Force Center, or follow me at Ken Napzok, or go to my website, kennapzok.com. And Joseph, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on all the social media. You can just search for Joseph Scrimshaw, and you'll find me on Instagram, Twitter, Hive, Mastodon, all those places. TikTok. I just put out a new TikTok with my Fennec Shand action figure. Did you know she comes with an extra head? Anyway, that's a whole other thing. You can also find me on YouTube. I got a new short film that'll be putting on YouTube soon, so join me over there. But for now, for myself, for Ken, for Quick Draw Quasar, this has been the Bad Batch Report.